New worries about election misinformation and disinformation.
I think Spanish-speaking communities are vulnerable not because the community or the people are vulnerable, but because social media platforms don't do enough.
Why the false stories can spread so quickly among Spanish-speaking communities, and what some Texans are doing to fight the problem. A grassroots push to get the state to release data on how many Texans are dying because of pregnancy or childbirth complications. The new development that could get the report to lawmakers sooner. Held up, victims of violent crimes across Texas waiting months, even years, for state money to rebuild their lives. We dig deeper into the problem and potential solutions in the works.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. As we gear up for Election Day, we're hearing more concern about false information aimed at voters. One particular group of voters may face a higher risk. Our Daniel Marin looks closer at how election disinformation is a growing problem facing the Spanish-speaking community and how social media algorithms could be making the problem worse.
Hi there, we're at the Austin Central Library, so I'm going to try to keep my voice down. But we came here to dig into the topic of misinformation, particularly when it comes to social media with the election just around the corner. Now, this is really nothing new, but some academics are actually becoming increasingly concerned about misinformation when it comes to the Spanish-speaking social media landscape. First off, I want to talk about the difference between misinformation and disinformation, because it is a very important distinction. So one way to remember it is that misinformation is just false or inaccurate information, whereas disinformation is false or inaccurate information that is deliberately created or deliberately spread. So just think deliberate disinformation. Jacobo Licona studies disinformation on social media for the Equis Institute, a nonprofit that advocates for Latino communities.
I would say that Latinos are definitely not necessarily more susceptible to disinformation than other groups.
He says when it comes to finding reliable reporting, the cards are kind of stacked against the Spanish-speaking community in the U.S. And here's why. Think of all the reputable news sources in English, whether it's network news, cable news, major newspapers. In Spanish, the reputable options are far fewer.
So they often go to social media to get news and information. And while there's a lot of good information on social media, there's oftentimes also maybe more problematic content that might be disinformation.
Licona says another issue, the social media algorithms don't always do an adequate job of quickly spotting disinformation in Spanish. Okay, so when it comes to the big players in English-speaking social media, it's of course Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. But in terms of direct messaging, in Spanish, WhatsApp is king. According to consumer data group Statista, more than half of Latinos in the U.S. use WhatsApp.
It's widely used for everything, from business to family connections.
Nayeli Gallegos moved to Austin from Mexico 20 years ago and recently became a citizen.
Every time I travel back to Mexico, you see the WhatsApp logo in businesses and banners. They use it for everything.
She says restrictions on data south of the border make WhatsApp an easy way to communicate. But it's also another way misinformation spreads between friends and family members.
I think this is a really big problem.
So says Josephine Luquido, an assistant professor of journalism and media at UT Austin and a researcher in this field.
One of the great things about WhatsApp is a lot of people are on it. One of the real struggles of studying and understanding misinformation on WhatsApp is that it's often encrypted and in private platforms. And so we're seeing a large amount of misinformation get spread on WhatsApp that isn't actually detected. Oftentimes I'm seeing it from a family member or a friend.
But because WhatsApp is different than typical social media sites, flagging misinformation isn't an easy sell.
It's like if all of a sudden somebody wanted to verify what you're sharing on your texts to other people,
Yes.
I really don't think that people who use WhatsApp really see it as a social media platform. They see it as a communication tool.
So what can be done to combat mis- and disinformation? Well, trace back information you see posted on social media to the original source and make sure that source is reputable. Also, be wary of information in memes or screenshots. Those are harder for algorithms to detect. And connect with groups pushing social media companies to do more for their Spanish-speaking users.
Spanish-speaking communities are vulnerable not because the community or the people are vulnerable, but because social media platforms don't do enough.
Daniel Marin, State of Texas.
There is a lot of work to be done here to even the playing field. Online now, we have more information about groups working to slow the spread of mis- and disinformation in the Spanish-speaking community. Just scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to the links in this story in the Texas Politics section of our website. There's a grassroots push for the state health department to release a report which includes data on how many Texans are dying because of pregnancy or childbirth complications. Advocates with the Maternal Health Equity Collaborative rallied Tuesday at the state capitol, demanding the release of that data. The health department first told our investigators the report would be released by next summer, but there's a new development. As Arezow Doost explains, the data is now expected to be out before the legislative session starts in January.
State data on why Texas moms are dying and if those deaths were preventable has been delayed since September. But now the Department of State Health Services says it will be released sooner than expected. In a letter to State Representative Donna Howard, who is the chair of the Texas Women's Health Caucus, which focuses on women's health policy, the health department's new interim commissioner writes that she intends to provide lawmakers key data and recommendations in time to help inform efforts during the next legislative session. She says the Texas Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Committee meets again in December, and she will discuss this with them. She adds that the department will provide recommendations ahead of the session about how to make the mortality reviews more efficient.
Was that too late?
I think that it was due on September 1st, and that's by law. So there's a reason why that timeline exists. Currently, legislators are setting their policy agendas, as are other organizations that advocate for families and for health care.
Nakenya Wilson is on the state's committee, which is still in the middle of reviewing 2019 maternal deaths. She's also a founding member of the Maternal Health Equity Collaborative, which advocates to improve maternal health among Black women. They're demanding the data be released now.
And at this point, we're talking about using data to inform policy. And this is not just numbers on a page. These are lives of women who have died.
Wilson says the delay impacts better understanding of what's causing Black women across the state to have pregnancy-related deaths 2.3 times that of white women. She says that's according to older data from the state. She adds that a recent report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, which analyzed CDC data nationally, found maternal deaths for Black women was disproportionately higher compared to other women during the pandemic.
The CDC provided a grant to the state to utilize a tool that helps us in our review process to be able to determine if discrimination was a part of a pregnancy-related death. And so this report will be the first report that provides that additional context of discrimination and any recommendations.
Arezow Doost for State of Texas.
The Maternal Health Equity Collaborative says the state also needs to extend Medicaid coverage to 12 months postpartum. That would allow for better monitoring of a woman's condition before it becomes life-threatening. The group adds that Medicaid should reimburse for doula services and require cultural competency training for medical professionals.
Millions of state dollars meant to help victims of violent crimes across Texas stalled for months, sometimes years. We take a closer look inside this division of the Texas Attorney General's office. Held up, crime victims waiting for state money, coming up.